Why did everyone trust her with their lives but know nothing about who she really was? The medical bay at Naval Base Coronado hummed with controlled chaos. Fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across the faces of elite warriors just back from Syria. 36 hours of combat, bullet wounds, shrapnel, exhaustion carved into every line of their faces. And there she was, Dr. Sarah Chen. Small, quiet, moving between wounded Navy SEALs like water flowing around stone. Her hands never shook. Not when cleaning wounds that would make most people turn away. Not when blood pooled on sterile floors. Not when grown men screamed through clenched teeth. She had the kind of calm that shouldn't exist in a civilian contractor. The kind of precision that whispered secrets she wasn't telling. Petty Officer Martinez watched her stitch the deep gash across his forearm. His voice came out rough, grateful. "Doc, you're an angel." Sarah smiled, soft, brief, said nothing. She had learned long ago that in this world of alpha males and testosterone-fueled bravado, actions mattered more than words. At 28, she had been the base medic for 3 years, earning respect through competence, through showing up early, staying late, never complaining, never asking questions that didn't need asking. The SEALs trusted her completely with their physical wounds, but they knew almost nothing about the woman who patched them up after every dangerous mission. Across the room, Lieutenant Commander Jake Thompson watched her work. Even with a bullet graze burning across his shoulder, he couldn't stop noticing how she moved. Military precision. That was the only way to describe it, not the careful movements of a civilian who learned medicine in a classroom. This was something else. Something trained into muscle memory through repetition and pressure. Her hands never hesitated, no matter how severe the injury. She had seen every kind of trauma the human body could endure, seen it, treated it, survived it, yet she remained calm, focused, as if nothing in this bay could surprise her anymore. "Chen, when you're done with Martinez, I need you to look at Reynolds." Jake's voice carried authority, the kind that came from giving orders in places where hesitation meant death. But when he spoke to Sarah, there was always something different, respect, maybe something more. Hospital Corpsman Reynolds lay across the bay on a gurney, his leg elevated, wrapped in blood-stained bandages. Shrapnel from an improvised explosive device had torn through his thigh, missing the femoral artery by millimeters. The kind of wound that could end a military career. Everyone in the room knew it. Sarah finished with Martinez and moved to Reynolds' bedside. The young corpsman was pale, lips pressed tight against pain that was trying to break through whatever medication they'd given him. She had worked on him before during training exercises, but this was different. This was real combat trauma, and the weight of it showed in his eyes. That look soldiers get when they realize their body betrayed them, when they understand that strength and skill don't always matter against explosives and bad luck. "How bad is it, Doc?" Reynolds asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah examined the wound carefully, her fingers probing gently around the shrapnel entry point. She had seen worse injuries in her time, much worse, but she kept that knowledge to herself. Instead, she focused on what Reynolds needed to hear, what would help him fight instead of surrender. "You're going to be fine," she said quietly. "The shrapnel missed all the major vessels. We'll get you cleaned up and on the road to recovery." As she worked, cleaning the wound and preparing it for surgery, Sarah's mind wandered to another time, another place. Desert sand instead of sterile tile floors, the sound of incoming mortars instead of the gentle hum of air conditioning, screams in languages she barely understood, blood that looked the same no matter whose body it came from. She pushed the memories away, like she always did, concentrated on the task at hand, on Reynolds, on the here and now, because if she let herself remember everything, she wouldn't be able to function. And these men needed her functional. They needed her steady. They needed her to be the calm in their storm. The other SEALs in the medical bay watched Sarah work, with admiration, with curiosity. There was something about her that didn't quite fit the profile of a typical military contractor. She never flinched at the sight of blood, never asked unnecessary questions about how injuries occurred. She understood military terminology without explanation, moved with an economy of motion that spoke of extensive training. the kind you didn't get in medical school. Petty Officer Tank Williams had been coming to the medical bay for various injuries for 2 years, a massive man whose biceps strained against his uniform sleeves. He had tried numerous times to engage Sarah in conversation beyond medical necessity, but she always deflected personal questions with professional politeness, the kind that was too smooth, too practiced, too perfect. "Doc's like a ghost," Tank had once told his teammates. "You know she's there, you know she's good at what she does, but you never really know who she is." That observation was more accurate than Tank realized. Sarah Chen lived her life in carefully constructed compartments. Her colleagues knew her as a competent medic who showed up early, stayed late, never complained about the demanding work. Her apartment was sparse, functional, containing nothing that revealed her past, no photographs on display, no personal mementos, no indicators of a life lived before arriving at Coronado. The truth was that Sarah carried scars far deeper than any of the physical wounds she treated daily. She had learned to live with silence as her constant companion, finding comfort in the routine of medical care, in the predictable rhythms of military life. The SEALs trusted her with their bodies, but she trusted no one with her history, no one with the weight she carried every single day. As she finished treating Reynolds and prepared him for transport to the base hospital, Sarah caught Jake's eye across the room. He was studying her again, with that intensity that made her uncomfortable. Jake had always been different from the other SEALs. Where others accepted her presence without question, he seemed to sense that there was more to her story, more than she wanted anyone to know. "Reynolds is ready for surgery," Sarah reported, stripping off her latex gloves and disposing of them in the medical waste container. "The wound is clean. I've started him on antibiotics as a precaution." Jake nodded, but his eyes remained fixed on her face, searching for something. "Good work, Doc. Same time tomorrow for follow-ups." "Of course," Sarah replied, already beginning to clean her instruments and restock her supplies. As the wounded SEALs were transported to various treatment facilities and the medical bay emptied, Sarah remained behind to complete her paperwork, to prepare for the next inevitable wave of injured warriors. This was her world now, sterile, predictable, safe. She had built this life carefully, brick by brick, creating a barrier between who she was now and who she had been before. But walls built from secrets have a way of crumbling when the right pressure is applied, and tomorrow would bring pressures that Sarah Chen had never anticipated, forcing her to confront a past she had worked so hard to bury. The silence that had protected her for 3 years was about to be shattered by the very people she had dedicated her life to healing. In the quiet of the empty medical bay, Sarah allowed herself a moment of vulnerability. She looked at her hands, steady, sure. Hands that had saved lives, and taken them. Tomorrow she would discover that some secrets are too heavy to carry alone, and that sometimes the people you least expect to understand are the ones who understand you best. The next morning arrived with the sharp crack of gunfire echoing across the training grounds, but something felt different today. Sarah made her way to the medical bay, coffee in hand, watching through the windows as new SEAL candidates struggled through Hell Week exercises. The sight brought back memories she preferred to keep buried, but today those memories felt closer to the surface than usual, pressing against the walls she had built, demanding to be acknowledged. She had barely settled into her morning routine when the alarm klaxon sounded. 3 short blasts, incoming casualties from a training accident. Sarah immediately shifted into emergency mode, checking her supplies, preparing treatment areas, her heart rate steady, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. Within minutes, she could hear the distinctive whine of helicopter rotors approaching the landing pad adjacent to the medical facility. The first casualty through the door was Petty Officer Davis, a young SEAL she had treated before for minor training injuries. This time was different. His face was pale with shock. His left arm hung at an unnatural angle, compound fracture. Behind him came 2 more SEALs supporting a third whose leg was clearly broken below the knee, the bone pressing against skin, threatening to break through. "What happened?" Sarah asked as she guided Davis to an examination table. Repelling exercise went wrong, gasped Petty Officer Brooks, one of the supporting SEALs. Line snapped. Davis fell about 20 feet. Jenkins landed bad when he tried to catch him. Sarah's assessment was rapid, professional. Davis had a compound fracture of the humerus. Jenkins had a tibial fracture. Both needed immediate attention, but neither injury was life-threatening. She could handle this. She had handled worse. So much worse. As she worked on stabilizing Davis's arm, preparing him for surgery, Sarah felt the familiar rhythm of emergency medicine taking over. The world narrowed to wounds and treatment protocols, to stopping pain and preventing complications. Everything else fell away. This was where she lived now, in these moments of controlled crisis, where her training mattered more than her past. But then Jake walked in, and something in his expression made her pause. "Doc, we've got a situation," he said quietly. "Master Chief Ghost wants to see you in his office." Now, Sarah's stomach tightened. Master Chief Richard Ghost Patterson didn't summon people to his office for casual conversations. He was the senior enlisted SEAL at Coronado, a legend in the community, and he didn't waste time on small matters. "I'm in the middle of treating casualties," Sarah said, focusing on Davis's arm, trying to keep her voice steady. "It wasn't a request," Jake replied, his tone gentle but firm. "Brooks and Martinez can handle the basic stabilization. This is important." Sarah looked up at him, saw something in his eyes that made her chest tight. Concern, understanding, like he knew something she didn't, something that was about to change everything. She handed off Davis's care to Brooks with detailed instructions, stripped off her gloves, followed Jake out of the medical bay with growing dread pooling in her stomach. They walked in silence through the corridors of the base, past training rooms and briefing areas. Sarah's mind raced through possibilities. Had someone discovered her real identity? Had her carefully constructed cover finally crumbled? Was she about to lose everything she had built here? Master Chief Ghost's office was exactly what you'd expect from a man with 30 years in special operations. Spartan, functional, walls covered with unit photos and commendations. A massive desk that had probably seen more classified briefings than most people could imagine. Ghost sat behind that desk, a man in his 50s with silver hair and eyes that had seen too much of the world's darkness. He gestured to a chair. "Sit down, Doc." Sarah sat, her hands folded in her lap, trying to appear calm while her heart hammered against her ribs. Jake remained standing near the door, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Ghost studied her for a long moment. Then he pushed a folder across the desk. Sarah didn't move to open it, didn't need to. She could see the edge of what looked like military records, service photos, documents she had thought were buried deep enough to never surface again. "Captain Lisa Morgan," Ghost said quietly. "3rd Infantry Division, 3 deployments to Afghanistan, Bronze Star for treating wounded soldiers under enemy fire, Distinguished Service Cross for extraordinary heroism during the Battle of Mara." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face, felt the carefully constructed walls of her new life beginning to crack. "I don't know what you're talking about," she whispered, but even she could hear how weak the denial sounded. Ghost leaned back in his chair. His expression wasn't angry, wasn't accusing, it was something else, something that looked almost like respect. "The thing about being a ghost," he said, "is that you learn to see other ghosts, people who are hiding, running, trying to disappear." He tapped the folder. "It took me 2 years to figure it out. The way you move, the way you handle trauma, the way you never flinch, that's not civilian training, Doc, that's combat experience." Sarah's throat felt tight. Words wouldn't come. 3 years of carefully maintained silence was shattering around her, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. "I started digging 6 months ago," Ghost continued. "Called in some favors, had some people look into your background. Dr. Sarah Chen's credentials are real, but Sarah Chen herself, she only existed starting 3 years ago, right around the time Captain Lisa Morgan was reported killed in action during a mission in Kandahar province." Jake moved closer, pulled up another chair, sat down beside her. "We're not here to judge you," he said quietly. "We're here because we need to understand, because you're one of us, and we take care of our own." Sarah finally found her voice. "I'm not one of you," she said. Not anymore. That person died in Afghanistan. I'm just a medic now. Ghost shook his head. You can't kill who you are by changing your name. You can't erase service and sacrifice by hiding from it. He opened the folder. Inside were photos Sarah hadn't seen in years, her in desert camouflage. Younger, harder, covered in dust and blood, standing with soldiers who had become family, many of whom hadn't made it home. Why did you fake your death? Jake asked, not accusatory, just curious, genuinely wanting to understand. Sarah looked at the photos, at the ghost of who she used to be, and for the first time in 3 years she let herself remember, really remember, without pushing it all away. I couldn't carry it anymore, she whispered. The weight of everyone I couldn't save, every soldier who died because I wasn't good enough, fast enough, smart enough. Her voice cracked. I was broken, and I didn't know how to fix myself, so I ran. Ghost and Jake exchanged glances. Then Ghost did something Sarah never expected. He stood up, walked around the desk, and extended his hand. Thank you for your service, Captain Morgan, he said, and thank you for continuing to serve, even when you thought you had nothing left to give. Sarah stared at his hand, at the respect in his eyes, at Jake's nod of agreement. They weren't judging her, weren't angry that she had lied. They understood, because they were warriors too, and warriors understood what it meant to carry impossible weight, what it meant to break, and what it took to keep serving anyway. Slowly, Sarah reached out and shook Ghost's hand, and felt something shift inside her, something that had been frozen for 3 years beginning to thaw. The question hanging in the air between them was heavier than any she had ever faced in combat. Now what? Sarah sat in Master Chief Ghost's office, the folder of her past life spread open between them like evidence at a trial. Photos she had tried to forget, commendations that felt like accusations, a service record that read like someone else's story. But it wasn't someone else's story, it was hers, and these men now knew it. Ghost settled back into his chair, his weathered face showing decades of hard decisions and harder truths. Here's what's going to happen, he said. This information doesn't leave this room. As far as official records are concerned, Dr. Sarah Chen is exactly who her paperwork says she is. A civilian contractor with impressive medical credentials. He paused. Let that sink in. But between us, between the teams, you're Captain Lisa Morgan, and that matters. Sarah felt her chest tight. I don't want special treatment. I don't want people looking at me differently. Too late, Jake said, not unkindly. We already look at you differently. We just understand why now. He leaned forward, his expression serious. Do you know what your reputation was in Afghanistan? I served with guys from 3rd Infantry. They still talk about you, about the medic who ran into fire to drag wounded soldiers to safety, who worked for 18 hours straight during the Battle of Mara, who refused to leave anyone behind. Sarah shook her head. They remember wrong. They remember some hero who doesn't exist. I'm not that person. Aren't you? Ghost asked. Because the woman who treated Reynolds yesterday, who stayed calm when everyone else was panicking, who knew exactly what to do in the middle of chaos, that looked a lot like the Captain Morgan I've been reading about. The words hit harder than Sarah expected. She had spent 3 years trying to convince herself that she had left that version of herself behind in the Afghan desert, that the competent, calm medic was just a shell, a performance. But maybe Ghost was right. Maybe you couldn't completely kill who you were, even when you desperately wanted to. I had a good reason for disappearing, Sarah said quietly. The last mission, the ambush, I made choices that got people killed, triage decisions that haunted me every night. I couldn't function anymore, couldn't sleep, couldn't trust my own judgment. Her hands trembled as she spoke. So I let everyone think I died in that explosion, and I built a new life where I wouldn't have to make those kinds of choices again. Ghost was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled another document from the folder, an after-action report, official military documentation of that final mission. I read this report, he said. 5 wounded in the first 30 seconds of the ambush, 2 killed instantly. You were the only medic, no backup, no supplies beyond what you carried, and you kept 3 soldiers alive for 4 hours until extraction arrived. And 2 died, Sarah said, her voice breaking. 2 19-year-old kids died while I was trying to decide who to treat first, because I wasn't good enough to save them all. Jake stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the training grounds where young SEALs were pushing themselves to their limits. You know what the difference is between us and civilians? He asked. Civilians think we never fail, that we're superhuman, but we know the truth. We know that sometimes you do everything right and people still die. That's not failure. That's just reality. He turned back to face Sarah. You didn't fail those soldiers. The ambush failed them. The intel that led them into a trap failed them. The enemy that opened fire failed them. But you fought for them until the very end. That's not something to run from. That's something to honor. Sarah wanted to argue, wanted to list all the ways she had failed, all the decisions she questioned, all the what-ifs that tormented her sleep. But something in Jake's voice stopped her. Maybe because he had been there. Maybe because he understood in ways that civilians never could. Maybe because she was tired of carrying this weight alone. What do you want from me? She asked Ghost. Just to keep being exactly who you've been for 3 years, Ghost replied. Keep taking care of our people. Keep being the best damn medic we've ever had. The only difference is now you don't have to pretend you don't understand what we're going through. Now you can be honest about your experience. And if I don't want that, Sarah asked, if I want to keep being just Dr. Chen, just a civilian contractor who treats injuries and goes home, Ghost smiled, small, understanding. Then that's your choice. We're not going to force you to be someone you're not ready to be. But Sarah, he closed the folder. Running from who you are doesn't make the pain go away. It just makes you lonely while you hurt. The truth of those words settled over Sarah like a physical weight. She had been lonely, so lonely, even surrounded by people who trusted her and respected her work, because she couldn't let them close, couldn't risk them knowing who she really was, what she had done, what she had lost. She stood up, her legs feeling unsteady. I need some time to think about all this. Take all the time you need, Ghost said, but know this. Whatever you decide, you have a family here, people who understand, who have been through their own versions of what you survived. You don't have to carry this alone anymore. Sarah nodded, couldn't trust herself to speak, walked out of Ghost's office with Jake following quietly behind her. They walked in silence back toward the medical bay. Sarah's mind was spinning. 3 years of carefully constructed defenses were crumbling. And she didn't know if that terrified her or relieved her. Hey, Jake said softly as they reached the medical bay entrance. For what it's worth, I'm glad we know, not because it changes how we see you, but because maybe now you can stop hiding. Sarah looked at him, saw genuine care in his expression. I don't know how to do that, she admitted. I've been hiding for so long I don't remember what it feels like to just be myself. Then maybe it's time to figure it out, Jake said. He squeezed her shoulder gently. And you don't have to do it alone. Inside the medical bay, Brooks and Martinez had finished stabilizing Davis and Jenkins. The training casualties had been transported for surgery. The space was quiet again, waiting for the next wave of wounded warriors who would need her skills. Sarah stood in the doorway, looking at the familiar space with new eyes. This had been her sanctuary, her hiding place. But maybe it could be something else. Maybe it could be where she finally stopped running. She thought about the soldiers she had saved, the ones who were alive because of her skills and her courage, about the SEALs who trusted her with their lives every day, about the possibility that maybe she wasn't as broken as she thought, that maybe service and sacrifice didn't have to end because the weight got too heavy to carry alone. Sarah took a deep breath, stepped into the medical bay, and for the first time in 3 years she let herself feel something other than guilt and grief. She felt hope, small, fragile, but real. Tomorrow she would decide what to do with the truth that was now exposed, but today she would just keep doing what she had always done, taking care of her people, one wound at a time, one life saved at a time, because that's what warriors did. They kept fighting, even when they were broken, especially when they were broken. Would they still look at her the same way now that they knew? Sarah moved through the next few days in a strange fog of anticipation and dread. She kept expecting everything to change, for the SEALs to treat her differently, To either put her on a pedestal she didn't deserve or look at her with pity she couldn't stomach. But nothing changed. Martinez still joked with her while she changed his dressings. Tank still tried to convince her to join them for poker night. Reynolds sent her updates on his recovery with the same grateful respect he had always shown. It was like the revelation in Ghost's office existed in a separate reality from her daily work. Except for the way Jake watched her, not with suspicion or judgment, with understanding, like he could see the war she was still fighting inside her own head. And one afternoon, as she was restocking supplies, he finally addressed it. "You're waiting for the other shoe to drop," he said. "Not a question, an observation." Sarah didn't stop working, kept organizing bandages with more focus than the task required. "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do," Jake said gently. "You're waiting for us to treat you differently, to either worship you or pity you. But that's not going to happen, Sarah. You're still the same person who's been taking care of us for 3 years. We just understand you better now." She finally looked at him. "How can you say that? Everything's different. You know about the medals, the missions, the soldiers I lost. That changes things whether you want it to or not." Jake pulled up a chair, sat down like he had all the time in the world. "Let me tell you about my first combat deployment, Iraq 2007. I was 23, thought I was invincible, thought I had all the answers." His expression darkened with memory. "Lost 3 guys from my team in the first month. All because I made calls that seemed right at the time, but turned out to be wrong." Sarah stopped pretending to work, listened. "For 2 years after that, I questioned every decision, every order I gave, every mission I planned, wondered if I should have done something different, if those 3 guys would still be alive if I had been smarter or faster or better." He met her eyes. "But here's what I eventually learned. You can't command in combat and not lose people. You can't make life and death decisions and get them all right. The only way to avoid that pain is to never serve at all. And that's not really living, that's just existing." Sarah felt something loosen in her chest. "How did you get past it?" "I didn't," Jake said honestly. "I still think about them, still wonder, but I learned to carry it differently. Not as proof that I failed, but as proof that I cared, that I took my responsibility seriously, that their lives mattered enough to haunt me." He leaned forward. "You're carrying your losses like they're evidence against you. But what if they're actually evidence of how much you cared? How hard you fought to save everyone?" The question hit Sarah like a physical blow. She had never thought about it that way, had always framed her grief as guilt, her memories as accusations. But what if Jake was right? What if the weight she carried wasn't proof of failure but proof of love, of commitment to the people she had served with? "I don't know how to see it that way," she whispered. "Then let us help you," Jake said. "That's what teams are for. We carry weight together. We help each other see truth when we're drowning in our own lies." Before Sarah could respond, the door to the medical bay burst open. Tank Williams filled the doorway, his massive frame barely fitting through. "Doc, we've got a situation. Training exercise went sideways. Multiple casualties incoming." Sarah immediately shifted into emergency mode. Personal crisis pushed aside by professional necessity. "What are we looking at?" "Helo crash during night ops," Tank said, his voice tight. 4 SEALs, unknown injuries, but the bird went down hard." Sarah's stomach dropped. Helicopter crashes were unpredictable, could mean anything from minor injuries to catastrophic trauma. She started pulling equipment, preparing for the worst. "ETA." "5 minutes," Tank said. "Medevac is already inbound." Jake stood up, moved to help her set up treatment areas. "You good?" he asked quietly. Sarah nodded. This was what she did, what she had always done. When crisis hit, she didn't freeze. She moved, she acted, she saved lives, or she died trying. The familiar sound of helicopter rotors filled the air, grew louder, closer. Sarah positioned herself at the entrance, ready to assess casualties as they came through. Her mind was already running through protocols, triage procedures, treatment options. This was her territory, her battlefield. The first SEAL through the door was conscious but bleeding from a head wound. Sarah guided him to a table, did a rapid assessment. Concussion, possible skull fracture, needed imaging but stable for now. The second was carried in by 2 medics, unconscious, chest trauma. Sarah's hands moved automatically, checking airway, breathing, circulation, tension pneumothorax. She grabbed a needle decompression kit, found the landmark on his chest, inserted the needle with practiced precision. The hiss of escaping air was immediate, life-saving. The third casualty was already being worked on by another medic. Broken leg, serious but manageable, and then the fourth came through. And Sarah's world stopped. Petty Officer Carson, 22 years old, massive internal bleeding, his abdomen rigid, his skin pale and clammy, classic signs of hemorrhagic shock. Sarah knew these injuries, knew them too well. This was the kind of trauma that required split-second decisions, the kind that could go wrong in 100 different ways, the kind that had haunted her for 3 years. For a moment she froze, felt the weight of every patient she had lost crushing down on her, saw their faces, heard their last words, felt the failure burning through her veins. "Doc," Jake's voice cut through the fog, steady, calm, "we need you, Carson needs you." Sarah looked at him, saw confidence in his eyes, not doubt, not pity, just absolute certainty that she could do this, that she was the right person for this moment. She took a breath, pushed the memories aside, focused on Carson, on the here and now, on the life she could still save. Her hands moved, fast, sure, establishing IV access, pushing fluids, calling for blood products, preparing for emergency surgery because there wasn't time to wait. Around her, other medics worked on the other casualties, but Sarah's entire world had narrowed to Carson, to his injuries, to the fight for his life. She worked for 45 minutes straight, Jake assisting, handing her instruments, anticipating what she needed before she asked. Working together like they had done this 1,000 times before. And when Carson's vitals finally stabilized, when the bleeding was controlled and he was ready for transport to the surgical team, Sarah stepped back, let herself breathe, let herself feel the victory of one more life saved. Jake put a hand on her shoulder. "Good work, Doc, you saved him." Sarah looked at Carson, at his chest rising and falling with each breath, at the life that was still there because she hadn't frozen, hadn't run, hadn't let fear win. "We saved him," she corrected. "This is teamwork." Jake smiled. "Yeah, it is." And in that moment, Sarah understood something she hadn't before. She had been trying to carry her past alone, trying to prove she could survive without needing anyone. But that wasn't strength. That was just isolation wearing a mask of independence. Real strength was letting people in, trusting them with the truth, working together instead of hiding alone. Maybe it was time to stop being Dr. Sarah Chen, the ghost with no past. Maybe it was time to be Captain Lisa Morgan, decorated veteran who had earned her scars and her skills, who had something to offer beyond just technical competence, who could be honest about who she was, not despite her past, but because of it. How do you tell people you've been lying to them for 3 years and expect them to still trust you? That question haunted Sarah as she cleaned up the medical bay after Carson's evacuation. Her hands moved through familiar motions, disposing of used equipment, restocking supplies, preparing for the next emergency. But her mind was somewhere else, turning over Ghost's words, Jake's confidence, the way they had worked together to save Carson's life, like a team, like family. She had always told herself that keeping her past secret was protecting everyone, that if people knew about Captain Lisa Morgan, about the decorated combat medic who had faked her own death, they would either reject her or put impossible expectations on her. But maybe that was just fear talking. Maybe she had been protecting herself, not them. The medical bay door opened. Sarah looked up, expecting another casualty or a routine check-in. Instead, she found half a dozen SEALs filing in. Martinez, Brooks, Tank, Peterson, and others she had treated over the years, all looking at her with expressions she couldn't quite read. "We heard," Tank said simply, "about who you really are." Sarah's stomach dropped. Word had spread, faster than she expected. Of course it had. This was a tight-knit community. Secrets didn't stay secret for long. "Ghost told us the truth," Martinez added. "About Afghanistan, about Captain Morgan, about everything." Sarah braced herself for anger, for betrayal, for the accusation that she had lied to them, that she had built their trust on false foundations. But Tank stepped forward, and instead of anger, his expression showed something that looked like awe. "Doc, I mean Captain, I owe you an apology." Sarah blinked. That wasn't what she expected. For what? All those times I pushed you to talk about your past. All those times I thought you were just being shy or mysterious. I didn't realize you were carrying that kind of weight. He shook his head. I thought I knew what service looked like, but you're on a whole different level. I'm not, Sarah protested. I'm just someone who ran away when things got too hard, who couldn't handle the pressure, who faked her own death because she was too weak to keep fighting. Brooks stepped forward. That's not what the reports say. Master Chief Ghost shared enough of your military record to paint a pretty clear picture. Bronze Star, Distinguished Service Cross, 3 deployments, hundreds of soldiers saved under combat conditions most medics never see. And 17 lost, Sarah said quietly, the number that had defined her for 3 years. 17 soldiers who died because I wasn't good enough. Martinez moved closer, his expression serious. My cousin served with the 3rd Infantry Division. He was at the Battle of Mara. He still talks about Captain Morgan like she was some kind of miracle worker. Says she worked for 18 hours straight. Refused to leave the aid station even when mortars were landing all around her. Saved so many lives that day they lost count. Sarah felt tears burning behind her eyes. I also made choices that got people killed, triage decisions in the middle of an ambush, choosing who to save first, and 2 soldiers died while I was working on someone else, 19 and 20 years old. They died because I made the wrong call. The SEALs were quiet for a moment. Then Peterson, a combat veteran himself, spoke up. That's not how triage works, Captain. You know that. In a mass casualty situation, you treat the most critical patients first, the ones who have a chance if they get immediate care. You can't save everyone. That's not failure. That's just reality. It felt like failure, Sarah whispered. After that mission, I couldn't function anymore, couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't trust my own medical judgment. The Army wanted to send me to counseling, but I knew I was done, so I arranged to disappear. She looked around at the faces of men who had become her family over 3 years. The mission went wrong in more ways than one. There was an explosion that separated me from my unit. In the chaos, it was easy to let everyone believe I had been killed. I made my way to a refugee camp, then to a medical charity that helped me get back to the United States with new identification. The room stayed silent. Sarah continued, the words flowing now that the dam had broken. I came here thinking I could still use my skills, but without the pressure of life and death decisions. I thought training injuries and routine medical problems would let me practice medicine without having to face the kind of trauma that broke me. She laughed bitterly. Turns out SEALs get into just as much trouble as infantry soldiers, just in different ways. The laughter that followed was warm, understanding, the kind that comes from shared experience. Tank spoke again. So you've been carrying all that weight alone for 3 years while taking care of us, while saving our lives, while being the best damn medic any of us have ever worked with. He shook his head. That's not weakness, Captain. That's incredible strength. I lied to you, Sarah protested. About who I was, about my past, about everything. How can you still trust me? Martinez stepped forward. Because lying about your name doesn't change the fact that you've saved lives here, that you've been there for us when we needed you, that you've earned our respect 100 times over. He paused. The way I see it, you didn't lie about the important things. You lied about labels, about job titles. But the person you've been these 3 years, that's the real you. And that's the person we trust. Sarah felt something breaking inside her, not breaking down, breaking open, like a shell that had protected her but also trapped her was finally cracking, letting in light she hadn't seen in years. I don't know how to be Captain Morgan anymore, she admitted. I don't know how to be that person who was confident and capable. I feel like I'm barely holding it together most days. Jake appeared in the doorway. He had been listening. Then be Dr. Sarah Chen, who's also Captain Lisa Morgan. Be both. Be whoever you need to be in any given moment, but stop hiding. Stop pretending you're less than you are. He walked over to stand with the other SEALs. We're a team. That means we carry weight together. You've been carrying your past alone for 3 years. Time to let us help. Sarah looked around at the faces surrounding her. Men who had seen combat, who understood loss, who knew what it meant to make impossible choices and live with the consequences, who weren't judging her, weren't putting her on a pedestal, just accepting her, all of her, the decorated veteran and the wounded healer, the confident medic and the broken survivor, all of it. "I don't deserve this," she whispered. "Neither do we," Tank said with a grin. "But you keep patching us up anyway, that's what family does." And just like that, the weight Sarah had been carrying for 3 years felt a little lighter. Not gone. She knew it would never be completely gone, but shared, distributed among people who understood, who cared, who weren't going to let her face it alone anymore. For the first time since leaving Afghanistan, Captain Lisa Morgan allowed herself to believe that maybe she could stop running from who she had been and start building something new from who she was becoming. By evening, word had spread through the entire SEAL community at Coronado, the medical bay filled with team members who had come to see their medic with new eyes. Sarah sat at her desk, completing paperwork while conversations buzzed around her in hushed, respectful tones. She could feel the change in the air, the way people looked at her now, but it wasn't pity. It wasn't hero worship. It was something else. Recognition, understanding, the kind of respect that came from shared service and sacrifice. Tank Williams approached her directly. The massive SEAL pulled up a chair and sat down heavily, his usual boisterous demeanor replaced by something approaching reverence. "Doc, I mean Captain," he began awkwardly. "I need to say something. All those times I pushed you to talk about your past, all those times I tried to get you to open up, I thought you were just being mysterious. I didn't realize you were carrying that kind of weight." Sarah looked up from her charts. "You don't need to apologize, Tank. And you don't need to call me Captain. I'm not that person anymore." Tank leaned forward. "Maybe not in title, but you're still the person who earned a Bronze Star for treating wounded soldiers under enemy fire. You're still the person who received the Distinguished Service Cross for extraordinary heroism. Those things don't just disappear because you changed your name." Around the medical bay, other SEALs nodded in agreement. Ghost had shared enough of Sarah's military record to paint a picture of a combat medic whose reputation for courage and skill had become legendary among those who served alongside her. "The thing is," Tank continued, "we always knew there was something special about you. The way you never panicked no matter how bad things got. The way you seemed to know exactly what to do in situations that would break other people. Now we understand why." Martinez joined the conversation. "Remember when Carson came in earlier, with that massive internal bleeding, most medics would have frozen, would have waited for a surgeon, but you just did what needed to be done, like you'd done it 1,000 times before." He paused. "Because you have, haven't you?" Sarah nodded slowly. "In Afghanistan, you learn to work with what you have. No perfect conditions, no backup always available. You make decisions and live with them. Or you don't make decisions and soldiers die. Those are your options." Peterson, another veteran, spoke up. "I served 2 tours in Iraq, saw plenty of medics work under fire, but the ones who lasted, the ones who saved the most lives, they all had that same look you have, that calm in the middle of chaos, that certainty even when everything is uncertain." He shook his head. "We should have recognized it sooner, should have known you weren't just some civilian contractor who happened to be good at medicine." "I didn't want you to know," Sarah admitted. "I thought if anyone found out about my past, they'd either put impossible expectations on me or see me as damaged goods, someone who couldn't hack it in real combat, who ran away when things got hard." Jake had been listening from near the door. Now he stepped forward. "Is that really what you think? That we'd see you as damaged because you struggled after watching soldiers die in your arms?" He pulled up a chair, sat down facing Sarah directly. "Let me tell you what we actually see. We see someone who served with distinction in one of the hardest roles in the military. Someone who saved hundreds of lives under conditions most people can't even imagine. Someone who carried that weight until it became too much. And then, instead of completely falling apart, found a way to keep serving, to keep using her skills to help people." His voice was gentle but firm. "That's not weakness, Sarah. That's resilience." Sarah felt tears threatening, fought them back. "I faked my own death. I abandoned my unit. I let people think I was dead rather than face them after failing." "You didn't fail them," Ghost said, appearing from wherever he had been observing. I've read your after-action reports, all of them. Every single one of those 17 soldiers you lost died from injuries that would have been fatal regardless of who was treating them. Traumatic brain injuries, catastrophic blood loss, damage that was simply incompatible with life. He moved closer, his expression serious. You didn't fail them, Captain. You gave them dignity in their final moments, comfort when they needed it most, and you saved hundreds of others who went home to their families because of your skill and your courage. Sarah shook her head. You don't understand. The last mission, the ambush. I had to choose between two soldiers, both critical, both dying, and I picked wrong. The one I thought could wait died while I was working on the other one. The medical bay went silent. Finally, Jake spoke. What were their injuries? Sarah closed her eyes, saw it all again like it was yesterday. Williams had a sucking chest wound. Rodriguez had severe abdominal trauma. Williams was conscious, talking, begging me to help Rodriguez first because Rodriguez had kids, so I did. I worked on Rodriguez, stabilized his bleeding, and when I got back to Williams, he was gone. The silence stretched. Then Peterson spoke quietly. Rodriguez survived, Sarah nodded. Made it home, got to meet his third kid. Last I heard, he was working as a mechanic in Texas. Then you made the right call, Peterson said. Not the easy call, not the comfortable call, but the right one. You saved the soldier who could be saved. That's what good medics do. But Williams died, Sarah whispered. Because I listened to him instead of following my training, because I let emotion override protocol. Martinez shook his head. You listened to a dying man's final wish, to save his friend, to make sure someone's kid still had a father. That's not a mistake, Captain, that's humanity, that's compassion in the middle of hell. Tank added, and you've been punishing yourself for it ever since, carrying guilt for making an impossible choice in an impossible situation, while Rodriguez is alive, raising his kids, living the life you made possible. Sarah looked around at the faces of these warriors, saw understanding in their eyes. They had all made hard calls, had all lost people, had all questioned their decisions in the dark hours of the night. They knew, they understood, in ways that civilian counselors and well-meaning friends never could. So what happens now? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ghost smiled. Now Captain Lisa Morgan continues serving as the finest combat medic the Navy SEALs have ever had, except this time she does it as herself, not hiding behind someone else's identity. And, Tank added with a grin, she starts coming to team barbecues and poker games like a normal member of the family. Sarah smiled despite herself, felt something loosening in her chest, a weight she had carried for so long finally beginning to lift, not disappearing, but being shared, distributed among people who understood, who cared, who weren't going to let her face it alone anymore. She was no longer Dr. Sarah Chen, the mysterious medic with no past. She was Captain Lisa Morgan, decorated combat veteran, someone who had fought and bled and sacrificed, who had saved lives and lost them, who had broken under the weight and found a way to keep serving anyway. And for the first time in 3 years, that felt like enough. The medical bay slowly emptied as SEALs returned to their duties, but the atmosphere had changed. The silence that had protected Sarah for so long was finally broken, replaced by voices of people who understood exactly what it meant to serve, to sacrifice, to carry the invisible wounds of war. Sarah sat at her desk looking at her hands, steady, sure. Hands that had saved lives and couldn't save them all, but hands that were still helping, still healing, still making a difference. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new wounded warriors, new opportunities to use her skills, but now she wouldn't face them alone. Now she had family, a team who knew her story and accepted her anyway, who saw her scars as evidence of battles fought, not proof of battles lost. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And Sarah had been acting with dignity for 3 years without even realizing it, serving quietly, saving lives without seeking recognition, carrying unbearable weight without asking for help. But true strength isn't carrying weight alone. It's knowing when to let others help carry it. It's trusting people with your truth, even when that truth includes failure and pain and choices you can never take back. Captain Lisa Morgan was done hiding, done pretending, done carrying her past like a sentence instead of a story. She was exactly who she had always been, a medic who cared too much, a soldier who fought too hard, a woman who refused to give up, even when giving up would have been easier. And that was more than enough. It was everything.